Good afternoon, everybody. This is Shay Ali on Inspired Online, and today I'm joined by my very special guest, Phillip Weeks. Now, if you've never heard of Phillip before, he's one of the UK's leading naturopaths. So he's got a lot of different skills ranging from acupuncture to homeopathy to just having a real holistic approach to your health. And often people go to him with long-standing problems that nobody else has been able to help with, and he kind of unlocks that door to give them a bit of assistance. So really amazing skill set, lovely guy as well to go and see, and someone that can really help. So I thought it'd be interesting today to have a chat about our health and also some stuff that interests you. I know you're also really passionate about Chinese medicine as well, and use that really integrated approach to help people out. So thank you for joining us today. Welcome. Hello. Now we'll start with the usual question. I know you've taken Inspired Stage in London in the past, but speaking from today, if you had to share your wisdom with the world in a nutshell, what would you say?
Such a big question, but I suppose from a health point of view, there is always something we can do to improve our well-being. There is always something to do. So whatever condition we have, whatever situation we are health-wise, there is always something that we can do to improve our baseline of health. And part of that involves looking at our life as a whole, and not just sort of little bits of our life, like just our diet or just our sleep or just how we feel, but look at everything really, because everything that we do matters and has an impact on our health. And I suppose over 20 odd years of practice, I've seen that if we can put fundamental things in place, we can all have a better level of health, and that includes energy, and that includes vitality and all kinds of things. So I suppose whatever situation somebody's in, there is always something that can be done. And I suppose that's my core kind of understanding of health and what I've seen, in my clinical practice.
Oh, that's wonderful. And then how do you start on that analysis? You might think you're okay, and the average person thinks they're okay, but perhaps they could be even better to get that natural health, to get that vitality.
Well, I think my patients sort of go into two broad camps really. Some people have obviously got very complex issues, complex health issues. They might be chronic health conditions, and other people kind of feel sort of all right, but want to feel much, much better. And actually I apply most of the same principles to all my different patients. So fundamentally, we've got to look at what is our intake? What are we ingesting? So that's kind of the first thing. What kind of liquids are we having? What kind of foods are we having? And then once that's established and we work out what it is that's particularly good for that individual, then we look at what is it that we're eliminating? How are we getting rid of the waste in our body? How are we getting rid of the toxins? What are we doing to support that process? So the fundamentals, I suppose, is going to be what our intake is. And as I'm sure most of us have found that, when we look at nutrition, the whole subject's really, really confusing. I did a master's degree in nutrition, and wow, I was amazed at just how complex this is. Some people say you've got to eat this diet, some people eat that diet. So if you want to get confused really quickly, then start studying nutrition, because you're going to find so many different opinions.
Wow. Well, I'm going to ask you a really unfair question on the back of that. Can you give us nutrition in a nutshell? What should we be doing right now?
Yeah, it is a good. Well, number one, we need to eat food, and I know it sounds like a silly statement, but we need to eat things that we recognize as food. So ingredients that we don't recognize, and we can't really, meals that we can't make at home, food we can't make at home and grow easily, we shouldn't be eating. So
wow,
we should be eating foods that our grandparents ate, and what is part of our ancestral health. So I'm very into the idea of, and through my own research as well, is looking at what are people's original diet, what according to even their racial characteristics as well. If you look at what somebody would be eating in China 100 years ago compared to what they might be eating in different places of the world, that has an impact on our health. What are we eating according to our genetical kind of strengths and weaknesses, in a sense. So we need to eat food, and we need to eat things that we recognize. So we can't make margarine at home. It's not something that is sort of possible. So for me, that wouldn't be a food I'd eat. We want to eat something that's kind of easy to make, to produce, something that's based on natural principles, because otherwise our body's not going to recognize it. So
Right.
a lot of the ingredients we're eating, our body doesn't recognize. So that's kind of the first fundamental. Is it something our grandparent eats or not? So
Right.
that's kind of how I start.
Okay. Wow, wonderful. So would you recommend, for example, butter as opposed to margarine?
Yeah, so absolutely. So I would recommend butter rather than margarine. I'll be recommending, if people are going to eat sort of breads, it would be more like sourdough bread, more like ancient grains, things that are the least amount of processing. And of course, the problem with these foods is that they take more effort to make and produce.
Yeah.
With our kind of very busy lifestyles, often it's easy to go down the route of eating much more refined foods. So
Mm.
I think people instinctively know what they need to eat. In fact, there's not many people I can sit down with and go, okay, and ask them, like, what should you be eating then? And I think most of us have a sense of what we should be eating, but then it's a bit more difficult sort of applying that in our life. But fundamentally, we need to eat food. We need to eat foods that have a connection to our ancient past as well.
Wow. Okay. So, how well does the modern supermarket cater for that? So, if I was to brave the queues at, one of my locals tomorrow.
Well, I think that it does, but most of the ingredients are on the outside of the on the sort of the outer reach of the supermarket, aren't they? So you've got the basic things, you've got the vegetables, you've got the meat, you've got the fish, and of course, the more you go inside the supermarket, the more involved the ingredients become. And you look at a lot of these things and you go, what is that? How do they make that? What is that food? So it's stripping back to the fundamentals, really, of, so if we're following a sort of more Paleolithic diet, or if you're vegetarian, then you go to a more sort of Asian diet. So it's going back to sort of what the fundamentals will be. But actually, the supermarkets do have them, but they tend to not in a pressed form. They're in their simple form that we now need to put together in order for us to be healthy.
Right. How can we find out what the form is for us that we need? Because you mentioned, like, there's ancient Chinese diets, there's ancient, I suppose, European diets. Do we need to do a detailed genealogy assessment, or?
Well, I think that some things are basic, that some things are very universal. And what's amazing about these ancient system of medicines that I've studied, so Ayurveda and Chinese medicine, is that actually that can be identified actually by looking at somebody. So when I'm with a patient, I can identify that by looking at their tongue, by looking at different biomarkers on their body. That can give me an idea of what's really needed. But sometimes as well, I'll do quite detailed analysis of even their sort of gut bacteria, because we know that we might be eating really, really good food, but if our body is not processing that food efficiently, then we're not going to be healthy. We're not going to be able to absorb the nutrition from that food. It could potentially cause problems. So often what I will do an analysis, a gut analysis with the laboratory, looking at all of the different bacteria, doing a whole sort of mapping of their whole gut bacteria and seeing what kind of yeast there are, have they got good bacteria, got more challenging bacteria, how are their enzymes, and then by that we're able to kind of work out really refine down what is it that individual needs to do in order to be healthy. Because if you've got a lot of different bacteria in your gut that are causing problems like dysbiosis and imbalance of bacteria, that can have huge impact on our health. And that isn't just physically, that can also be emotionally and mentally as well. We know that the gut biome can have an impact on our mental health. So I suppose once we've kind of looked at the diet, we have to look at kind of what's going on with the gut. And if we get that right, then a lot of things can improve in quite substantial ways for people in their health.
So how important, it sounds like an obvious question based on what you've just said, but how important is gut health, and to know what's actually going on in there?
Well, for me, it's when patients come with a particular symptom. So people might have multiple symptoms. So many people come and they might have eczema and asthma, and they might have depression, and they might have IBS, and they might have sinusitis and headaches and migraines. A lot of people have many different symptoms. And of course, what's great about Western medicine, it's very good for emergencies. So if you need emergency care, of course it's there, and it's very good for that. But this idea of medicating for every symptom doesn't make sense when it's more of a chronic illness. So people might have a chronic situation where they have many of these multiple problems. So if you take a pill for a migraine, another one for eczema, another one for asthma, then you're going to be taking many different medications, and that isn't going to be resolving the underlying situation. So for me, I'm always into like, why have people got that symptom? So why is it that someone might have asthma or IBS? What is the reason behind that? And underlying most people's health issues is going to be their gut microbiome. So whether that's somebody with issues around their hormones, and I see many people with thyroid imbalances, then it often will go back to the gut health. And so by getting that better, by attending to the gut bacteria and getting the balance there, then often symptoms will go, because we're treating the underlying cause, which is the body is trying to resolve the symptoms, resolve the imbalance by producing these conditions. It's communicating to us there's something wrong. So by going back to our gut, attending to that in some way, can make a huge difference to all kinds of different seemingly unrelated conditions.
Okay, so on the back of that, there's a lot of talk at the moment about supplements and what supplements should I take, and to keep myself healthy and to boost my immune system. Right now I've heard all sorts of things. What would you say to like the supplement junkies out there, and is there anything that we genuinely actually should be taking right now?
I mean, again, that's another huge subject, isn't it?
Yes.
What we should be taking, what form we should be taking. So obviously the best way to get our nutrition is from our food. I mean, I think everyone would agree that. Yeah. But what I see when I test individuals is like time again and again, we'll see certain deficiencies. So probably the most common deficiency I see in my clinic would be vitamin D. Okay. I think it's quite difficult to get enough vitamin D. Okay. And so unless people are taking supplements in the form of like cod liver oil and more sort of animal extracts, then many people are going to need to take a vitamin D supplement. And what's interesting is that, and this is where it gets complex, is that taking vitamin D on its own isn't going to be utilized properly by the body. So the vitamin D has to be taken with another nutrient called K2, and K2 and vitamin D need to be working together. Otherwise it doesn't get properly absorbed, and the vitamin D doesn't get utilized correctly in the system. So, I mean, what's interesting about butter, although it has very small amounts of these nutrients, they have them both combined. So often nature will provide them together. But vitamin D would be something I think everyone should take. But what's interesting is that some people actually need to get that tested, because although they might be taking vitamin D, they might not be properly absorbing it. So there might be some genetic differences where some people need a lot more vitamin D than others. But that's one of the most important supplements, not only just for our immune system, but for our hormonal health, for helping prevent all kinds of chronic inflammation. So certainly that's something that I would recommend in order for immune health. People talk about vitamin C, and yes, that has its place. But for me, vitamin D is going to be the most important thing that people start taking.
Yeah. And is that also specifically for right now with the, COVID-19 scare?
Well, I suppose, at the moment, obviously there is the whole kind of pandemic issue, but I see people every day with some kind of infections of various different kinds. So whether it's something like this, or whether it's the flu, or whether it's anything else, we still need to have the underpinnings of good health. And good health comes from having all the nutrients that we need, because all the biochemical reactions in the body, every single immune reaction, brain chemical, everything that goes on in the body relies on nutrients as the raw ingredients to make those interactions happen. So for me, that's going to have to be the fundamentals of good health. Is going to be step one, is to get all the nutrition that we need.
Yeah. All right. So we've talked about nutrition, but at the outset, we also talked about holistic health. The person is a whole person, and you know, beyond nutrition, there are people out there that, well, that have got that right, but they may have other things going on. So let's talk about mental health, and you know, what are things that we can do, especially right now, to make sure that that is on track?
Yeah, I mean, of course. I mean, you know, mental health is hugely important. And when you look at the statistics around, you know, what can contribute to early death in our lives. So we know that air pollution is a problem. We know that smoking is not good and all these kinds of things. But actually, loneliness can be one of the most important factors, you know, for causing an early death, because it can affect our immune system and our general health. And so health, of course, isn't just physical. It isn't just nutrition and physical things. It's going to be about how we nourish ourselves. And of course, what's interesting in ancient Chinese medicine is that there's an incredibly comprehensive way of looking at the psyche and the spirit. And they see that our spirit and our psyche and our mental health are all connected. So when we've had very, very difficult experiences like traumas and various other things, they get stuck in the body, and it creates what they call an issue with our breath. And it's not necessarily our breathing, but the breathing of our tissues. All of our tissues in our body have like they see it as a fundamental breath, which means that the way the energy flows through the body and the way that the lymph works, blood works, and everything else like that. And so these things get stuck. So be mentally healthy, we need our physical body to be attended to, but we also need to have our spirit attended to as well. And I remember I wanted to learn meditation, because obviously meditation is one of the things that can really make a difference to our well-being. And one of the things I did was went to a Shaolin monastery in China, and I was really keen about sitting down and doing meditation and learning these sort of advanced medical meditation processes. And really, there wasn't that much meditation. A lot of us had to go down to the stream in the morning. We had to go for a run. We had to do stretching. We had to do all these kinds of things. And only when we were physically exhausted were we then going, okay, so now we're going to get taught meditation. Wow. So this sort of mind-body connection is so profound that we have to look after our physical body, but also, you know, our spirit. We have to get aligned with, you know, why we are here, which is obviously the biggest question we can possibly cover. But
yeah, well, why don't you answer that? Why are we?
All right, well, we've got 5 minutes, so why not? But I think that it's interesting. In the Chinese philosophy, there is this idea of, they call it the mandate from heaven. So what they mean by that, there's this understanding that we're here for a reason, and our job, I suppose, is to kind of become aligned with that reason and to act that reason out, that reason for being in the world. And that doesn't have to be a grand thing. It can be something very, very simple. It can be something very, but it's important that we kind of find that mandate from heaven. So, and it's seen that if we can live our mandate from heaven, then we're aligned with who we are, and then we can take action according to that. So that's kind of our and I see that with acupuncture as well. There's actually treatments that can help align people to what we call, help them become aligned with who they are, so they can express that in the world. Wow. And if they can express that in the world, then things work much better in our system. We can bear all kinds of difficulty and suffering and challenges if we're aligned with our central purpose. And I suppose that's the sort of the core of Chinese medicine, is helping people connect to the core of their being and enable that to come out in the world. And so that's really important as part of the whole package, because then we're living with purpose, and that's really the most important thing we can do for our health.
Yeah, wow. Well, how do you find out, it's a two-part question really, how do you find out your mandate from heaven? And if you're in like a career, or you know, you're a homemaker or something, and you're really happy, is that your mandate from heaven? How do you know that you're living it?
So I think it's interesting. Normally you can tell when people are living their mandate from heaven. Of course, that might change as well. It might be that you're doing something for a few years and you're in the zone and you're kind of immersed in that, and that mandate can change throughout our life. So there is a core principle to who it is, but it's about being authentic to ourselves. And I suppose the thing is that when we are living our purpose and authentic with ourselves, then we people embody that, and so you can see that, and I think we know when we're not on our mandate as well. I mean, there'll be times in our life where we're going, oh, I'm not kind of in the zone of where I am. What's interesting in Chinese medicine is that one of the diagnostic methods is by taking the pulse, and the pulse isn't just about the heart health. It kind of symbolizes or connects with all the different parts of the body. And sometimes when I take people's pulse, I can see that their body and their spirit is in conflict. And if the body's in conflict with the spirit, then things don't work well. So either the body will throw up diseases in order to make us look at our mandate, or somehow there's other kinds of problems. So there are treatments related to that I work with a lot with my patients. But fundamentally, when we're kind of living our mandate from heaven, then there is a certain flow that occurs in ourselves, and you can see it in individuals. And we'll all have had times when we're in the zone and times when we're not.
So, and do you feel that, so when you feel you're in flow, do you think that's a good indicator to show that you are living your mandate from heaven right now?
Yes, so that's how we would see it, is that when we are connected with the core of who we are, then everything works better from that. So we're less in conflict, because I suppose life is tricky sometimes, isn't it? We all have our sort of trials and tribulations and difficulties, and it doesn't mean that we won't have challenges. It doesn't mean that that things aren't going to be tough sometimes, but we have, I suppose, that connection, that fortitude to be able to deal with it. And I suppose part of our building, part of the challenges are us building resilience, and building mental and emotional resilience as well. And I can see that when I treat sometimes elderly patients, their physical body might be under challenges, but some have this incredible resilience because they've gone through such adversity in their lives, overcome that adversity and become stronger as a result of that. So sometimes these challenges that we have to deal with can be really important for us to develop resilience. And I think that's a really important part of being healthy as well, is knowing that we have the internal resilience to be able to overcome the challenges that we come across.
Okay. So what do you think are some simple things that we can implement at home right now? Because not everybody is going to do a microbiome test right now, particularly when we can't even get to the post office or, whatever it is. Do you have any simple techniques that people can apply now, today?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So I think sometimes in ancient medicine, they do like the idea of fasting. So I think that fasting is a way of cleaning up the body, of having time off from food. So we often think about what food should we eat, but actually sometimes it's about not eating food or eating less food sometimes. So I like the idea of intermittent fasting, where you're eating a lot less food for one day a week. Okay. My dad used to, and he still does sometimes, like every Monday he wouldn't eat. He would fast on Monday, and it was just something that is incredibly healthy. And it's just interesting that he kind of adopted that routine from years and years ago when he trained in naturopathy in America. So when he was interested in that, so I think sometimes it's about not eating, and so sometimes it's good to have a break from our food. So maybe having like just soup through the day, or some people do vegetable juice or something like that. But the other thing that's really important as well as that is actually having routine. Right. So especially at the moment with sort of the lockdown and everything, then it's easy for us to lose the routine. And routine is something that underpins our health. And you'll see with sort of healthy elderly people, they're like eating on time, like breakfast is at this time, and lunch has to be like 1 o'clock 1 o'clock sharp. So I think routine is really important. And that's something that can be easily lost. And often what I see with my patients, especially those who are working in London, have really intense, busy lives, is that the routine can go out the window. And actually, we need that routine in order for our body to have the underpinnings it needs to be healthy. And of course, yeah, so going to bed early is really boring, but it's really important for our health, and having routine. So that can be really, really important to kind of put in place, trying to eat at the same time every day, and then sometimes have a fast day or eating a lot less, and to give the body's digestion a little bit of a break. And I think as well, one of the things that's really can be really helpful for people and their microbiome is fermented foods. So that might be kombucha, but it might also be sauerkraut and those kinds of things. So I mean, we still probably have time to make that. So sauerkraut is something that's really, really good to make. Because that feeds the good bacteria of our body. So there's simple things we can do in order to sort of to create a new framework for health. But certainly routine is actually one of the most important things that we can implement.
Wow. All right. So I wanted to dig a little bit deeper into the fasting. You said your dad just picked one day a week and didn't eat. There's 3 fasts that come to mind right now. There's 16/8, there's 5/2, and obviously some people are on a Ramadan fast right now, because I think Ramadan started last week as well. So, is there a better way to do it, or is one better than the other?
So I think with fasting, there's certain types of fast that can be more helpful for other people. So if you've never done any fasting before, then normally I quite like start with 1 day a week, where normally it comes from the idea that if you eat for men around about 600 calories and for women about 500 calories. So in a sense, it's kind of not a true fast, but it's eating a lot less for the day. And what we found with any kind of fast is that certain things happen in the body. So number one is that the brain does something different. When we're not eating, the brain goes into kind of a very deep mode of, oh my goodness, there's nothing to eat. I better get smarter. I better start working things out so I can find out where to eat. So we know that people's concentration can improve, their intelligence can even improve, all kinds of things. So all kinds of things happen in the brain when we fast. Also, it can affect our inflammatory markers in our body as well. So inflammatory pathways can reduce. So I think for people who've never done it before, I think it's really good to try the eating 500 or 600 calories a day. So that might be having a little bit of soup, or maybe like an egg for lunch, or a little bit of salad or something like that. So that can be a really
for 1 day, or
1 day a week. So I'd start with that. If you're good with that, if you can kind of get used to that, then 2 days a week is even better. So you wouldn't normally put them together, but you'd have like a Monday and a Wednesday or something. You fast. Interestingly, I find that people, and I've probably got 1,000 patients to fast over the years, and people find it much easier to fast when they're working. So when it's a day off, actually go, oh no, and they start sort of fantasizing about food and, oh no, I want this. So I think it's just a nightmare. So you don't want to torture yourself, right? Because it's easy. It's like, oh no. So if you can work and like be really busy when you fast, that's really, really good. So some people like the idea of, some people do better with missing breakfast and not eating up to lunchtime. So that can be good. But I think ultimately it is better that we eat breakfast. So from a Chinese medicine point of view, it's important for our overall health that we actually have breakfast. But you could do a fast where you have the evening meal, say on the Sunday night, and then you don't eat anything till lunch time the following day, or even later the following day. So there's sort of different variations on that. But actually for metabolic health, so for example, for long-term, for weight loss and other things, it's found that it's better to actually have breakfast and then not have the evening meal. But that's harder. That's harder for people, right? Because it's the evening that people normally go, oh, I'm a bit peckish and want something to eat. So there's different studies that have shown different things. But fundamentally, it's important to try and reduce our food intake for at least like 1 day a week. And if you're really good at that, if you kind of get used to it and go, oh no, I'm all right with that, then you could just have soup. And then some people just have can have an even just tea. So obviously it depends on the individual person and then medical history and everything else like that. So the advice has to be tailor-made to the person. But on the whole, some people can just have like ginger tea or something like that for the day and not eat. And one of the things that you notice is if you don't eat, you get you kind of hear your belly, right, a rumbling tummy. Yeah. So the medical term for that is called borborygmi. It's like a weird name.
Oh, well,
But what's actually happening? It's not that you're hungry, because people go, oh my goodness, I must be really hungry. I can hear my belly kind of gurgling and making noise. It's actually your body detoxifying and doing all kinds of things regarding the gut. So it stimulates something called the migratory motor complex. So this actually helps to clean the brush border of your small intestine. So when you get that gurgling of the stomach, that's your body actually trying to attenuate and deal with the inflammation in your gut. So actually it's quite a good thing to have ever so often. So you could make it really, really simple, eat a lot less food on one day. But if you want to do a pure fast, then you'd have just ginger tea or very, very light broth or soup for the day, gives your body a rest, and then you can eat the following day. And it has all kinds of benefits for our body and our mind as well. And like you mentioned about Ramadan, of course, Ramadan, all these different traditions, spiritual traditions, understand that fasting is very, very important for our mental, emotional, and even spiritual health. So every spiritual tradition has some kind of fasting involved, because I think that it's quite a powerful process when we don't eat. Our mind and our psyche really kind of work stuff out that we don't when we're normally eating.
Yeah, it's amazing what comes up. We are nearly at time, but I do want to ask you about sleep, because you mentioned that too, and you mentioned the importance of sleeping early. Let's take a bizarre example. What would happen if you're a night worker? Does that still work for them, or?
It's really difficult for night workers. We know that, and when I test things like cortisol levels in their system and hormonal levels and of various different kinds, then the night workers don't fare as well. It's not good for your health. So you can do it for short periods of time, but it's really not good for long-term longevity and health. And studies can back that up as well. So it's not great. I think that ideally we, certainly if I'm dealing with people with neurological conditions, so serious neurological conditions, they're going to need to go to bed certainly at 10 o'clock at night.
Wow,
so,
okay.
Because certain things don't happen in the body, do not heal properly unless you're asleep at certain times. So there's a science called chronobiology, which shows that there's different rhythms of the body does different things at different times, and our immune system goes into immune surveillance when we're asleep. So our body goes and looks for stuff to heal, so it's search and destroy. It's finding viruses and bacteria and yeast and those kind of things. And the body will not be able to do those things unless we get enough sleep. So ideally, it's going to be before midnight. Ideally, before 11 would be the best.
Okay.
The room needs to be really, really dark, pitch black dark, nothing flashing, no kind of LED lights, no phones, anything like that, because that's a distraction. And then we need to train ourselves to sleep properly. And sometimes there can be reasons why we wake up in the middle of the night, but we really need to have at least those 6 hours, at least, in order for us to repair. But fundamentally, it goes down to not being overstimulated when we go to sleep, and classic things, checking Facebook and looking online and all the things that are very, very easy for us all to do. Kind of having a bit of space between then and the time we fall asleep is really important.
And what's our body missing out on if we don't go to bed before 10 or go to bed at 10?
So within these ancient traditions, the idea is it affects our adrenal health. So Chinese medicine, they call it the kidneys, but in the adrenal health. So we're more likely to have dysregulated cortisol levels. So what that means is the cortisol, the stress hormones, are not peaking it. Because we actually do need cortisol. We need cortisol in the morning to wake us up. So if we don't get enough sleep, the timing of the cortisol peaks can be out, and people will feel tired at the wrong times of the day. So basically, we should feel alive, we should feel ready for the day, just like kids do. Kids wake up and they're like, wow, that's it. My 2-year-old thing at 6 o'clock. It's like he's like kind of ready to go.
Yeah.
So we are, and sometimes I measure those in order to sort of see where people are on their cortisol levels. But if we are not getting enough sleep, we exhaust ourselves, and our cortisol levels can become dysregulated, and we get stressed and tired at different times of the day, when that doesn't need to happen if we have enough sleep.
Okay, thank you so much for your time today. Before you go, do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share with our audience?
I think that like during this challenging time, I think it's really important to kind of take stock of our lives as well, isn't it? This is such an important time to kind of look at our lives, what's been working, what's not working in our lives, and that might be our health, and that might be our diet, and all kinds of things. Because I'm really committed to that we want to come out of this whole crisis much healthier than when we went in. And I think in order to do that, it's really good to take an appraisal of your whole life and go, okay, where do I start? Start with good food, good nutrition, getting enough sleep, getting a routine in place, and all those kinds of things. And it's very simple things, but they can make a huge difference to our level of well-being and health.
Well, thank you so much for all this value that you've given us today. And for everyone out there, go do that life appraisal. But if they'd like to do that with you, or they'd like some assistance on anything else that you've talked about, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
So the best way is to go onto my site. So it's phillipweeks.co.uk, and there's a contact form, and you can contact me there, or I have a Facebook page as well. So you're welcome to connect that way as well.
Lovely. Well, thank you very much. And obviously take care of yourself, and I hope to see you in person again very soon.
Thank you so much, Shay.